Good morning. I'm Valerie Castro in for Joe Fryer.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us on a Tuesday. I'm Savannah Sellers. Breaking right now on Morning News Now. Dam destroyed. Ukraine is calling it a, quote, carefully planned act of terrorism. This morning, a major dam on the front lines of war in southern Ukraine is now critically damaged. This new video shows floodwaters surging into nearby villages and towns, prompting entire neighborhoods to evacuate. Now, Russia and Ukraine are blaming each other for the breach amid questions about whether Ukraine's counteroffensive has begun. We will bring you the latest. A new twist in the investigations involving former President Donald Trump. This morning, speculation is growing about the special counsel's probe and whether the former president could soon be indicted. This after a meeting between Trump's lawyers and Department of Justice officials investigating Trump's handling of classified documents found at his home, Mar-a-Lago. And at the same time, more challengers are preparing to enter the race against Trump for the Republican nomination for president. We have team coverage this morning. Lift off. This morning, SpaceX's latest cargo capsule is now docked at the International Space Station after a successful launch yesterday. We will tell you about the critical supplies that were sent, plus what is next for the mission. And Apple for your eyes. Excitement is growing over Apple's latest tech, a virtual reality headset with the biggest price tag in the market. We'll tell you just how much it costs, brace yourself, and why some tech enthusiasts say it might be worth it. I won't be buying it anytime soon.
I won't either.
But it's kind of interesting to see them getting back in the virtual reality game after we'd kind of seen the metaverse cool. So we have a lot to learn on that a little bit later. We begin this hour, though, with breaking news out of Ukraine and a major development in this war.
Overnight, one of the country's biggest hydroelectric dams was destroyed. The Russian-controlled facility supplies water to Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant and the Crimean Peninsula. The breach is causing unprecedented flooding to the area, threatening local villages and towns. Evacuations are now underway in nearby Kherson, with thousands said to be at risk from rapidly rising waters. Ukraine has accused Russia of blowing up the dam, but Russia says Ukraine is to blame for the breach. NBC News is unable to verify either side's claims. NBC News correspondent Ali Arouzi joins us now for the latest. Ali, some dramatic pictures coming out of Ukraine this morning. What is the situation like right now at the dam and that surrounding area?
Good morning. That's right. From the satellite pictures and the imagery on social media, you can see that the entire dam wall has been washed away, and the situation in and around it remains very precarious because so much water has been breached with far-reaching consequences. And it was blown up in the early hours this morning around 2:30 local time, and it's a vast structure built during the Soviet era. It's one of 6 dams that sits along the Dnipro River, which stretches all the way from the very north of the country into the sea in the south. And just to give you an idea of the scale of it, it's just over 3 yards tall, 2 miles long, and holds a volume of water about the size of the Great Salt Lake in Utah. Now, since the blast, a torrent of water has been gushing downriver, prompting dire ecological warnings, and both Russian and Ukrainian officials have ordered residents to evacuate the area as buildings in and around it are starting to get submerged.
Ali, just a moment ago, I mentioned that Russia and Ukraine are blaming each other for a lot of what we're seeing right now. What do we know about how this happened?
That's right. Unsurprisingly, both sides are blaming one another. The Kremlin is saying that this was an act of terrorism, which is shorthand at pointing the finger at Ukraine. And Ukraine is blaming Moscow for this brazen attack. And NBC News, as you said, hasn't been independently able to verify either side's account. But it does make sense, or at least for it to be plausible, for Russia to conduct this operation, as Moscow may have feared that Ukrainian forces would use that road over the dam to get troops across the river into Russian-held territory as a part of this ongoing counter-offensive. Now, Ukraine's foreign minister has also said that they're after new sanctions against Russia over the dam blast, in particular sanctions aimed at Russia's missile industry and nuclear sector.
Ali, talk to us about the importance of this dam for the local region. We understand that it provides water to the power plant in that area. Is there any risk to that facility?
That's right. This dam is very important, and it serves a number of purposes. So there are many possible consequences. Firstly, it serves as a critical water supply to the Crimea. It also supplies water for a host of communities upstream. Farmers rely on the water to grow their crops, so this could impact tens of thousands of people if it recedes far enough and causes irrigation issues. The dam also, as you mentioned, provides cooling water to the nuclear power station at Zaporizhzhia, around 100 miles upstream, which is also under Russian control. Now, the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, said there was no immediate nuclear safety risk, but it was monitoring the situation. Also, depending on the size of the breach, and it also appears to be very large, it could flood communities downstream substantially, if not catastrophically. Now, President Zelensky has convened a National Security Defense Council earlier today to figure out how they can move forward and put an end to the damage and the chaos to the communities around the dam.
Okay, Ali, a lot to keep an eye on there. We know you'll keep us posted. Thank you so much.
We're also following breaking news right now out of the Vatican, where Pope Francis has been back in the hospital. According to local reports cited by Reuters, the Pope was taken there for a checkup before returning to the Vatican earlier this morning. NBC News has not been able to independently confirm that, and the Vatican has not made any comment. Well, back in March, the 86-year-old spent 5 days in the hospital for a respiratory infection, and then 2 months later, he had to cancel several appointments in May because of a fever. Well, the Pope does have several high-profile trips coming up, so it would not be uncommon for him to have a checkup ahead of those. So hopefully all is good there. Well, now let's get to the latest on the investigations into former President Donald Trump. Lawyers for the former president met with Department of Justice officials, including Special Counsel Jack Smith, Monday. This comes as a second grand jury investigating the former president's handling of classified documents is expected to meet in Florida this week. On social media yesterday, Trump called the investigation a, quote, witch hunt, writing, quote, how can DOJ possibly charge me who did nothing wrong when no other presidents were charged? For more, we are joined by NBC News Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Delaney. And Ken, good morning. Always good to have you with us. So what more do we know at this point about yesterday's meeting?
Good morning, Savannah. Neither side is talking about exactly what was said during this meeting. We saw the trio of Trump lawyers go in the Justice Department. We saw them leave 2 hours later. We know that the special counsel was there. We also know a senior career official at the Justice Department was there. I learned that Attorney General Merrick Garland and Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco chose not to attend this meeting. That's consistent with Garland's approach to these special counsel investigations, which is hands-off. What this really felt like is kind of a last-ditch appeal by the Trump lawyers who are trying to prevent their client from being indicted. And it's very common for defense counsel to come in and try to meet with senior Justice Department officials and make their case that the actual prosecutors investigating are missing something, and so the more senior officials should step in. Nobody thinks that's going to happen here. There's some reporting that Trump lawyers are no closer to believing that their client is not going to be indicted. And so now we wait and we see what happens, Savannah.
So this is a big question because there are so many different things going on here. But if you could help us just tease some of this out. So there's also a grand jury in Florida expected to hear witness testimony this week in the classified documents case, separate from the grand jury in Washington, also separate from, of course, the big news story when the president was actually indicted in New York. Walk us through why and how all of these different grand juries are convening.
That's right. So leave New York aside because that's a state case unrelated to this. So in the federal system, you can bring testimony as a prosecutor before a grand jury anywhere that's relevant to your case, right? So it's all one system. So there's been, as you said, there's been a grand jury in Washington that's been investigating this classified documents case. But remember, a lot of this conduct took place in Palm Beach, Florida, where Mar-a-Lago is. And so we have reporting that there is some grand jury testimony expected in Florida this week. It's unclear why that is. It could be any number of reasons. There could be a scheduling issue. There's a witness down there who can't get up to Washington in time. There could be a venue issue. There may be some charges in this case that they would like to bring in Florida rather than in Washington. And, of course, it's always possible, Savannah, that if they decide to charge this documents case, they could charge the whole thing in the Southern District of Florida because that's where, again, a lot of the conduct took place. We just don't know. It's a secret process. We have been able to learn, though, that there is some activity in front of a grand jury in Florida.
Ken, very quickly before we let you go, any idea timeline here?
We still believe, and all the signals are pointing to a resolution of this case, at least in the next couple of weeks. And most experts and people around this case that I talk to believe that because of the timetable and the election calendar. And most experts believe it's more likely than not that Jack Smith is going to file charges in this case. But again, we'll have to see. And of course, Donald Trump insists on his innocence, Savannah.
Ken Delaney, and we appreciate you. Thanks.
This will be a busy few days in the race for president as 3 Republican candidates are set to announce their campaigns. Former New Jersey Governor Christie is planning to launch his second run for the White House tonight in New Hampshire. And both former Vice President Mike Pence and North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum are expected to launch their campaigns tomorrow. For more now, let's go to NBC News senior political editor Mark Murray for more information this morning. Good morning, Mark. Let's start with Christie. He ran in 2016. He finished 6th in the New Hampshire primary when he dropped out. He endorsed the eventual nominee, Donald Trump. But since then, he has been critical of the former president. What should we know about Christie's presidential bid?
Yeah, I think the best thing to know about it is going to be an uphill battle for him. A recent Monmouth poll found that just 21% of Republican voters have a favorable view of the former New Jersey governor versus 70% who have an unfavorable view. That was the worst score that any Republican in the field or prospective Republican ended up having, according to that Monmouth poll. As you also ended up mentioning, he ended up finishing in 6th place in New Hampshire in 2016. But Christie believes that the best way to stop Donald Trump from being the Republican nominee is by running and taking him on. It will be a crowded Republican presidential primary.
Former Vice President Mike Pence filed his paperwork yesterday to launch that campaign. He'll kick it off tomorrow in Iowa. And we're also expecting North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum to join the mix. What can we expect to see from the two of them tomorrow?
Yeah, Pence has certainly been telegraphing his presidential bid for months, if not over the past year or so. And of course, what stands out about Mike Pence running is that he was Donald Trump's former vice president. And the fact that you end up having both Donald Trump's former vice president and also UN ambassador Nikki Haley does seem to be a rebuke to the former president, that some of the people who work closest behind him, including the person being the number 2, wants to take Donald Trump on to be the Republican nominee. As for Doug Burgum, even a lot of longtime political observers, he's not a well-known name, but he will be getting into the race on Wednesday. And you add it all up, and we have the makings of what will be a very, very crowded Republican field as we head into Iowa and New Hampshire, which are just months away.
Finally, Mark, the Republican National Committee has released requirements GOP candidates need to fulfill in order to get on the debate stage later this summer. Give us a breakdown of what those are.
Yeah, and these debate requirements, we talk about what will be a very, very big Republican field, but these requirements could actually kind of keep the stage quite small. And so on the top of the list, you have to have at least 1% in 3 qualifying national polls. You have to raise money from at least 40,000 unique donors. And then you have to sign a loyalty pledge that you will stand behind the Republican nominee, no matter who it is. That 40,000 donor what might be a heavy lift for some of these entrants into the Republican race. And then, of course, even Donald Trump has actually not indicated whether he would end up signing that loyalty pledge. So we have to wait and see not only who the remaining figures in this Republican race are, but who end up making the debate stage and who qualify it for it.
All right, as you mentioned, it's getting crowded for sure. Mark, thank you so much for breaking it down.
Yeah, and Mark already counting down. He says just a few months away. Give us a minute.
Turning now to Virginia, where new charges are being brought against the mother of the 6-year-old who shot his teacher earlier this year. 25-year-old Deja Taylor is now facing 1 federal count of being an unlawful user of a controlled substance in possession of a firearm and 1 federal count of making a false statement during the purchase of a firearm. Prosecutors say she lied about using marijuana when buying a gun last year.
Well, back in January, Taylor's son brought a gun to school, shooting first-grade teacher Abigail Zwerner. Zwerner has since filed a $40 million lawsuit claiming the school ignored a history of problematic behavior from the child. That lawsuit is still ongoing. Well, NBC News legal analyst Danny Ceballos is here with us on set to help break this down. Danny, always great to have you with us. So Deja Taylor, she's already been indicted on 1 felony charge of child child neglect, and then 1 misdemeanor count of leaving a firearm to endanger a child. Why are we seeing additional charges now? What's going on?
Because, frankly, the federal government has looked at this, and in all likelihood, they feel like this is somebody who did something wrong, so they're going to look around for a crime to charge her with. And there may be a little bit of sarcasm in my voice. I don't think this is this is not one of the top 10 things that you would say this mother did wrong in a gigantic list of things that she did wrong, which is using marijuana and lying on a federal form ATF 4473. Now, that being the case, should she be charged? Absolutely, if she was a user of marijuana, because it couldn't be more clear on the form. But this is a really interesting case that highlights how most of these charges are adequately handled by the state. Child neglect, leaving a firearm around a child. In this situation, the federal government looked at this and said, hey, this is somebody that did something wrong. Let's give her a close look. And, of course, they find out on the federal form ATF 4473. One of the questions you have to answer is, are you a habitual user of marijuana? Now, normally, a lot of those questions on that form are much more crystal clear. Are you a felon? There's a very clear answer to the question of whether or not you are a felon. Whether or not you're a habitual user of marijuana, little harder to say. I suspect what happened is the feds approached her. She voluntarily told them these things, that she uses marijuana, unless she has some conviction, but that would have shown up. That would have been a false statement about her felony conviction. But in this situation, it seems like she admitted it, so she's going to plead guilty. All indications are this is a guilty plea worked out in advance. But it's interesting to take a look at how the federal government doesn't have jurisdiction over all crimes. So this must be what they thought they could charge her with, which, when you take a step back, has nothing to do with leaving a gun in the hands of a child, letting a gun get access to a gun, negligently handling a gun. It's just that she was a drug user and lied on a form.
You just touched on this. Her lawyers say she plans to plead guilty. What does she stand to gain from pleading guilty, and what are prosecutors looking for in that deal?
90+% of federal cases end in guilty pleas. And that's because in the federal system, the trial tax, as we call it, is simply not worth it. And most of the time in federal cases, I'll be honest with you, they're much stronger than state court cases. The federal government has so many more resources to develop to charging or to use in charging defendants. So this is a case that seems like it may be a foregone conclusion. Although, you know, whether or not someone's a habitual user of marijuana may be defensible, the reality is when the full might of the federal government is bearing down on you, the vast majority of defendants decide to plead guilty and get the advantage of acceptance of responsibility, get a better sentence, and maybe that's what we're seeing here.
Danny Savalos, as always, I say it every time, we appreciate you. What would we do without you walking us through? Thank you.
Thank you. We're learning more details about that plane crash that killed 4 people this past weekend in Virginia after it flew over sensitive airspace in Washington. According to the crews of the Air Force F-16s sent to intercept the plane, the pilot appeared to have been slumped over. NBC's Tom Costello has the latest.
In a remote, thick Virginia forest, investigators are piecing through the decimated remains of that private citation jet that apparently ran out of fuel and crashed as Air Force fighter jets watched, unable to help.
Just prior to the incident, the pilot was slumped over.
Family members tell NBC New York that Adina Azarian, a prominent real estate broker, was on board with her 2-year-old daughter, Aria. Their nanny and the pilot headed for the Hamptons.
We're just devastated. You have to tell people every day that you love them.
It started at 1:13 p.m. Sunday as the plane left Tennessee headed for Long Island, New York. But at 1:28, just 15 minutes later, the veteran pilot stopped responding to air traffic control commands. The plane continued north all the way to Long Island before doing a U-turn and heading back towards Tennessee, still failing to respond to controllers.
November 611 Victor Golf, contact Washington Center 127-4902, acknowledge.
6 Air Force fighter jets were scrambled along the East Coast. As the plane approached restricted D.C. airspace, 2 F-16s were authorized to go supersonic.
They had to break the sound barrier to get up to speed to get to the aircraft in question.
Their twin booms startling residents and pets on the ground as they fired flares, then flew straight at the citation, calling the pilot.
This is an armed air defense fighter. You have been intercepted.
They quickly saw the pilot was slumped over and unresponsive as his plane continued flying into Virginia, where it crashed, having traveled 300 miles without radio communication. The NTSB is considering whether a sudden loss of cabin air pressure could have incapacitated everyone on board. Just as golf legend Payne Stewart and 5 others were killed in 1999 when their plane lost cabin pressure, then crashed in South Dakota.
You have a matter of seconds to get your oxygen mask on, or you will not be able to breathe. It could be anywhere from a matter of 15 seconds up to a minute to get that mask on. And if you don't, you will indeed pass out.
One theory about why the plane did a U-turn and came back is that the plane's autopilot may have been programmed to fly to Long Island, then return to Tennessee. Once the plane hit its New York destination, the autopilot then plotted the return without the pilot. The plane was not required to have any black boxes. The NTSB doesn't know if there were any on board. It's hoping to learn something from the plane's avionics. Back to you.
All right, Tom, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. All right, let's get a check now on your Morning News Now weather.
Meteorologist Angie Lassman joins us now with all the details from coast to coast. Good morning, Angie.
Good morning, guys. It is Tuesday. Finally, we are rolling through the work week, and we actually have some pretty nice weather in a lot of spots. Notice it's not all that busy in the middle of the country. The Midwest, down through parts of the Southeast, just a couple of showers near Atlanta. We've also got some showers and thunderstorms we'll watch for portions of Texas, New Mexico, really the southern plains. And then we've got some unsettled weather throughout New England. Let's start with the flooding risk, though, in parts of New Mexico, Oklahoma, and Texas. We do see places like Santa Fe included in this with that little bit of an extra kind of risk that you could see for flash flooding through the day today as we have periods of some heavy rain. This does extend into parts of Colorado, Denver, Pueblo, Amarillo, all included in that. So be aware of that here as we get through the afternoon and even the evening hours. Let's jump over to New England, where, like I said, we've got a system that's sitting just right near the coast, really a low pressure with an extending cold front that's going to leave us unsettled with the showers, the thunderstorms, and even the potential for some cool conditions. We'll see breezy conditions as well through the afternoon hours tonight. It will continue to see some of those showers sticking around. And really in northern New England areas, we'll still be dealing with some of those showers as we get into tomorrow. So keep that in mind. Not a whole lot of rain, but enough to be a little annoying if you have any outdoor plans or you're trying to get somewhere, maybe a half an inch or an inch. And how about this? We were dealing with, once again, smoke from the wildfires in parts of Canada. They are in Quebec. And that smoke is working its way into the Northeast and into the Mid-Atlantic. That's leaving us with the potential for some unhealthy air, especially if you're in the sensitive groups. This also is in combination with ozone, which we see a lot of times when it's warm and we have pollution, creates ozone, and that's what we're dealing with in a lot of these major cities like Dallas, Kansas City, Washington, D.C., Boston. If you are somebody that's sensitive to those smoke particles, make sure that you're taking it easy when you're outdoors. That'll be an issue for at least today, probably in tomorrow, maybe even extending through the week. Meanwhile, the heat is on in parts of the Midwest. I mean, 90 degrees in Omaha, 92 for Sioux Falls, guys. It's a big difference from what New England is seeing with temperatures in the 60s and in the 70s and barely getting into the high 50s in places like Maine and Vermont. So a tale of two different summers, I suppose, in a couple of spots, and we're going to keep it that way for a couple days.
Oh, yeah, I saw some of the live cameras NBC has, I think one downtown that local had showing that smoke, just like a haze this morning.
And you'll notice, even over the clear skies, it doesn't look great.
Yeah.
And it makes for a nice sunset, though.
Regina, our fabulous director, pulling that up like that. Angie, thank you so much.
Coming up, captives of cannabis. Later this hour, an NBC News exclusive on a sophisticated scheme involving drugs, human trafficking, and money laundering. What we've learned about who's responsible.
But first, after the break, a royal showdown in London's High Court as Prince Harry testifies against the British media. You are watching Morning News Now. Welcome back. Well, Prince Harry is making history today as the first royal to be questioned in court in over a century.
The Duke of Sussex arrived at London's High Court a few hours ago to testify against publisher Mirror Group newspapers, which he is accused of obtaining information about him illegally over the course of 2 decades, including by using phone hacking. The company is contesting the claims. Aaron Vanderhoff, Vanity Fair staff writer and co-host of Vanity Fair's Dynasty podcast, joins us now to break all of this down for us. Good morning, Aaron. Let's start with yesterday's events in court. What did Harry's lawyers allege, and what did the judge have to say about the prince not showing up?
Well, so Harry's lawyers have been talking about an array of articles about him that appeared in the Mirror from 1996 to 2010. And, you know, Harry's lawyer, David Sherborne, yesterday broke down a lot of what we expect Harry to talk about, mainly that his life was really kind of controlled by these, you know, the overall interest that caused him a lot of paranoia, ruined his relationships, but specifically that the Mirror group took a specific interest in certain different ways, and that there would be 33 stories where Harry would really break down exactly how much illegal activity he thinks happened, though there is not a lot of direct evidence.
So let's talk about what we have seen from Harry. I understand that he missed that opening day, which was what Valerie was referring to there, but now he has been testifying, I think, in the last hour, right? And his witness statement has been released. So what do we know at this point?
Yeah, a full 55-page witness statement. So yesterday, the judge was actually disappointed he wasn't there because he had asked all of the different plaintiffs. There are multiple ones. Harry's not alone. It's just he's the focus of this week to come on the first day where their case would be considered in case there was time. And his lawyer said yesterday that there was a security concern that led to, you know, not necessarily being able to be there at the time. But, you know, he's been on the stand for about an hour. He's been very cordial. You know, when he's disagreed with the Mirror Group, lawyer, the King counselor, he says, that's incorrect, Mr. Green. And he's been talking specifically so far about the intrusion in his relationships. And in his 55-page witness statement that was released, he goes into great detail about different people that he was talking to, the different information he might have been saying over the phone, and specifically the quotes that appear in Mirror stories that make him feel as though it could only possibly have been voicemail hacking.
Aaron, life for Britain's royals often plays out in the court of opinion as much as any other kind of court. Do we know how the British public and the media are responding to all of this?
Well, I mean, so Harry first announced this specific suit against his participation in his Mirror back in 2019. So we've been seeing, you know, this playing out for years. And I think that there's a sense in which, you know, we had the Netflix documentary, just like we showed in the US, we had the Netflix documentary, the memoir, like, we've seen a lot of Harry. But I think it's really important that he is he's making his complaints really, really specific. It's less about general press intrusion, which then I think causes a lot of people to say, oh, but you want to be in the press. And it's a lot more about the specific response that he had to things that are pretty plainly illegal.
All right, Aaron Vanderhoef, thank you so much for breaking it down. I know there's a lot more to look forward to in that case. Thank you.
Absolutely. Coming up on Morning News Now, critical supplies shot up into space. Up next, we will tell you about SpaceX's latest mission and what's next.
Plus, if you can't stop scrolling, this one's for you. We'll talk about the impacts of social media on teens and adults and what you can do to set some healthy boundaries. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. This was the scene as SpaceX launched its 28th commercial resupply service mission to the International Space Station yesterday.
And then this video shows what's called the Dragon cargo capsule moments after it docked with the ISS, the International Space Station, just a few hours ago, delivering those much-needed supplies. For more, we are joined by Jana Levin. She's a cosmologist and also the professor of physics and astronomy at Barnard College of Columbia University. I hope I got that all right. Professor, it is great to see you. Thank you for being here. We love getting to talk about these space stories, so we appreciate your time this morning. So tell us, what types of supplies are on this restock? What does it mean for people who are there on the ISS? But then also, I know this was carrying something particularly important, these solar panels. Tell us about that. Yeah.
So it's about 7,000 pounds of cargo. It's a lot of cargo.
Wow.
It's my understanding there's even fresh fruit on it for the astronauts, which will be a real treat. But there's supplies to get them through the end of the year and a handful of small experiments. They have hundreds of experiments on the go up in the space station. And of course, the solar panels, which is going to be very exciting because we're going to be able to see a spacewalk in a few days.
Wow. That is very exciting.
It's just tremendous. So there's going to be robotic preparation, removing the solar panels from the trunk and then making it ready for them to get into their own little spacecraft, which are their spacesuits.
Wow. Trunk like a car. You mentioned 7,000 pounds of equipment, some experiments that will be taken up there. Why are these so important? Tell us more about those.
Well, the experiments range from those that are looking at the effects of microgravity on human beings. We really don't know the long-term effects still of being in space. And if we want to build a space station or even colonize space, which is actually the ultimate ambition. We need to know the long-term effects of microgravity. So there are experiments like that, and there are experiments on plants and how they grow and how they pass on biological traits that might just be environmentally induced. And then there's some that are looking at climate and looking at thunderstorms from the vantage of the space station, where we can see electrical activity and probe it in a way that we can't on Earth. And so they basically range from climate science to biology to physics. And there's hundreds on the go already up in the space station.
So for people who just heard you say colonize space is the ultimate goal and think like, that sounds like the Jetsons or that creepy Jennifer Lawrence movie that came out a few years ago, what does that mean? And what does that look like now as we try to aim for that goal?
Well, you know about the Artemis mission, which SpaceX has also been involved in terms of transporting actual crew. Ultimately, Artemis wants to go to the moon and eventually begin to build things on the moon. So right now we're taking cargo like the solar panels from Earth to the space station. The idea would be, can we use the actual material of the moon itself in a kind of 3D printer to simplify things and actually build things, as opposed to only transporting? You know, we're not going to transport 80-foot steel beams to the moon. So can we figure out how to build stuff there and begin to make a waylay station on our way to Mars?
That is so cool.
It's always so interesting, the lives of the crew that are on the ISS. You mentioned fresh fruit will be on this resupply mission. Who decides what goes up for the crew members? Do they make requests?
I'm sure they do make requests, but it is an international collaboration, and so some of the cargo is coming from different parts of the world. And I do think they make modest requests, but the large supplies are just what they need to stay alive. And if you think about this isolated capsule, they need to get their energy from solar panels to some fraction, and they also have a lot of power that they have to maintain, and of course food supplies, and keep it all running.
Professor Jana Levin, this is so neat to get to talk about. Thank you again for coming.
Thanks so much.
Maybe we'll talk to you for the spacewalk too. Very exciting that we'll have that to look for. There we go. Thank you so much. Well, now it's time for our weekly mental health check-in. We are taking a closer look at how small changes to your daily routine can actually make a drastic difference in your overall well-being.
Plus, it can be overwhelming to set those boundaries on social media. We have tips to help you protect your mental health while scrolling through all of your favorite apps. Let's bring in board-certified psychiatrist Dr. Sue Varma for more on this.
Hello.
Dr. Varma, good morning.
Hi.
Let's start with some of those routine changes. Walk us through what kind of changes we're talking about and why it is so important to switch up our routine, which I know it can be hard to just begin to switch and make those changes.
Yes. So much about switching our routine, number one, is thinking about what our routine is and what's working for us. Something as simple as, what does my bedtime look like? Am I having the screen time away from my bed for at least 30 minutes? Look, the recommendations are 2 hours, but 30 minutes is great. Do I not have the phone next to my bed? So it's not the first thing I look at in the morning, and it's not the last thing I look at night. Do I have a glass of water by my bed? Do I have my vitamins? And something called situation selection. So when you look ahead at like your weekend, for example, if you have a say in the matter, do you get to choose which activities are going to make you happy and which activities are going to make you tired or irritable or angry? This is what we call situation selection, planning ahead and selecting for activities that we know are going to put us in a positive mood. The other thing is, a lot of times people don't know what puts them in a positive mood, and this is what's called affective forecasting. So affective has to do with your emotions, and forecasting is looking ahead. So getting really in tune with what your emotions are, what triggers them, both the good and the bad, is really important part of situation selection, or picking situations that work best for you and bring out the best in you.
Really good information there. I loved everything you said, Dr. Varma. Well, we've also been talking, of course, I mean, we've been talking so much about the mental health crisis that we're seeing in young people, but a lot of that we do think is linked to social media. But new surveys are also showing that adults are also just as impacted, which is not surprising at all to me, by this constant scrolling. There are a lot of things that you can't avoid, though. Maybe social media has to do with your job. In some ways, there are some, positives to being connected with people. So how can we create boundaries to help lessen the role that social media plays in a negative way in our lives?
Yeah, so think of spring cleaning, not just something you do for your closet, but also do for your social media account. And I would say, if you can, quarterly, look at the accounts that you follow and ask yourself, why am I following this person or this account? What information is it providing me? How is it helping me grow as a person? And what is it doing for my mood? If it's lowering my mood because it's making me feel competitive, it's making me feel irritable because I want something, A lot of times we follow people's accounts because we want to be in the know and we're curious, which is great. But is that enough to want to make you follow them even when they're making you feel bad? The biggest thing with social media is also how is it using your time? If you're not able to see friends because you notice that you're spending more than an hour a day. So for example, I have set on Instagram an Instagram crime check. So it throws me off after an hour, or it makes me be intentional to say, you know, you're done for the day. Do you really want to stay on? You have 15 minutes more. So just having that pause and that interruption to be like, do I really need to be on this? And start unfollowing and start muting accounts that don't make you feel good, and really be intentional and say, what am I getting out of this and how do I feel when I'm on it?
And so important to take that step back and really examine, as you said, each account. Why am I following this account to begin with? I feel like
spring
that
cleaning for your phone, for your brain. I love it.
Speaking of social media, there's a new trend growing on TikTok with one goal in mind, and that's to bring a little color to our wardrobes. It's called dopamine
Look at all
dressing.
of us. Does this count?
Yes.
The idea that dressing
It does.
colors can impact our mental health. So tell us, is there any validity to that trend?
You know, look, there are small studies that show that certain colors, so for example, red and black, are often perceived as being more attractive in other people when we see it. We see in a small study that shows that teams that are playing red and that they're at their hometown actually win more often. Again, keep in mind, these are small studies. Green increases creativity. Yellow increases happiness in the other person. But look, at worst case scenario, it boosts your mood, boosts your creativity, makes the person feel a little bit more confident, and there's nothing wrong with that. So I'm all for it.
Woo, there we go. Look at your red. I see what you did there, Dr. Varma.
You know me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Coming up, it's Apple's biggest unveiling in years, but getting your hands on their new virtual reality headset will take a big bite out of your wallet.
When we come back, more on what's now the most expensive VR device on the market, next on Morning News Now.
We are back with a global money laundering scheme that involves drugs and human trafficking across 3 countries. Well, who is responsible for that trafficking has been hard to determine until now. Here's NBC News correspondent Jacob Soboroff with more of his exclusive reporting in the latest installment of our series, Captives of Cannabis.
The DEA tells NBC News a sophisticated money laundering partnership between transnational criminal organizations might be to blame for that human trafficking in the marijuana black market that we've witnessed. And they tell us the consequences are far more deadly than we've previously reported. It's early in the morning in Riverside County, California. These sheriff's deputies are about to execute a dozen search warrants on residential homes. They say they're going to find illegal marijuana grows there and victims of human trafficking working on those grows. But first, they're going to go after the leader of the operation. Is this person a mid-level operator, kingpin, mastermind?
I would say this is a mid-level operator. We believe that the people that are ultimately in control are likely in China.
Search warrant, open the door!
All right. Nice and easy.
I got him.
What did you guys find in there?
We found several documents that ultimately link these suspects living in this home to several of the other locations that we've been investigating.
The couple's arrested, and deputies focus on the organized crime ring they say this grow appears to be a part of.
We don't know how large this organization is, but we do believe that it is global to some extent.
If it is so big, how come you guys are out here alone? Where's the federal government? Where's the DEA?
That's a great question.
To push for answers, we met Bill Bodner, DEA's special agent in charge of Los Angeles, for an exclusive interview.
In our reporting, we've seen Chinese nationals involved in the illicit cannabis trade. The law enforcement that we've been talking to says that they believe that the bosses of those operations are back in China. How is that connected to what you're seeing?
The Chinese criminal organizations have such a desire for U.S. dollars in cash that they're getting into a variety of criminal enterprises to create that cash. And I'm not surprised to hear that them running cannabis grows, it's generating cash that they're then using to accomplish capital flight out of China.
In other words, the DEA says this form of organized crime is one that extends far beyond black market cannabis and is rooted in a desire for Chinese nationals in the U.S. to get their money out of China due to recent restrictions in how much they can take out of the country. A U.S. Treasury official tells NBC News that Chinese criminal organizations are operating in the U.S. and now working with Mexican cartels by helping them launder money made from meth, fentanyl, and other drugs. They do so by loaning out the cartel's dollars to unsuspecting Chinese people living in America. These criminal organizations are then repaid in Chinese currency back in China, and the money launderers buy Chinese products and have them shipped to Mexico, where they're sold and give that money in pesos back to the cartels. In the end, no money actually crosses international borders, and the Treasury Department says the dirty dollars are, quote, disappearing into thin air. The DEA says instead of products like the clothes and appliances that were once widely available here in LA's wholesale district, the products money launderers are sending from China to Mexico are deadly.
Guess which product is very available in China that's not available here at all? Precursor chemicals. It was the synthetic drug explosion in 2015 and 2016 when this capital flight model started. Precursor chemicals were used as a way to transfer wealth.
In Mexico, the precursors are made into meth and fentanyl, synthetic drugs that have caused U.S. overdose deaths to more than double since 2015.
Hey, Sinaloa cartel, let me introduce you to Chinese organized crime. That's what happened. And by working together, they've been able to get millions, if not billions of dollars out of China into the United States, and they've been able to use a synthetic drug trade to do it.
For you in the DEA, how do you go after stopping this from happening?
Our focus is 100% Sinaloa cartel, Jalisco New Generation cartel, and it's because of this synthetic drug trade. It's like nothing we've seen before.
Until then, Mexican cartels and Chinese organized crime continue to use the United States as their middleman, with no end in sight. So that's what we've learned so far in this investigation. You heard DEA Special Agent in Charge Bodner tell us that this money laundering is fueling, in part, the greatest overdose crisis in U.S. history. Other remaining questions include, to what degree does the Chinese government know about or acquiesce to this alleged money laundering scheme, and what the scheme looks like operationally in China, Mexico, and here in the U.S.
Jacob Soboroff, as always, fantastic reporting. Thank you so much.
Some breaking Starbucks news this morning. Its olive oil-infused coffee line is arriving in some new states.
Oh, CNBC's Silvana Henao joins us with that and other money news. Silvana, have you tried it?
I haven't tried it yet, Savannah, but I am very interested in trying it. So we'll see. I'm excited. I'm excited for it to arrive in New Jersey. All right, let me get you guys some headlines. Starbucks is expanding its olive oil-infused coffee drinks to stores across the country. Now, starting today, the Oleato beverages will be available in 11 new states, including Connecticut, Alaska, New Mexico, Texas, and Vermont, as well as major cities from Austin, Boston, Chicago, and Miami. Starbucks debuted the drinks in select stores and reserved locations in March, and they range in price from about $6 to $7. Meanwhile, J.P. Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon will meet privately with a group of moderate House Democrats today. Bloomberg reports that banking and the economy are on the agenda, and Dimon has been urged to jump into the 2024 presidential race. Despite his protest, he doesn't plan to run. In an interview last week, Dimon said maybe one day he'd serve his country in one capacity or another, and he frequently meets with lawmakers, including during the debt ceiling standoff last month. AMC is bringing back its summer movie camp after a 4-year hiatus. Now, select movies at participating theaters will be shown for $3 on Wednesdays and $5 on Saturdays from now through August. A group of 14 movies will be rotated throughout the summer, including recent and classic family films such as Minions: The Rise of Gru, Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, Kung Fu Panda, and The Secret Life of Pets, one of my favorites.
Wow. Silvana wants to try olive oil coffee and loves The Secret Life of Pets. I love it.
Yeah.
That is so neat, though. What a cool thing for families.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Silvana, thank you. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Well, Apple is known for introducing groundbreaking new technology, and now it has officially stepped into the world of virtual reality.
The company unveiled a new VR headset yesterday called the Apple Vision Pro. However, with a $3,500 price tag, it will be the most expensive VR headset on the market. Lisa Edachico, senior reporter at CNET, joins us now. Lisa, good morning. So Savannah and I were talking about this earlier. Why is Apple jumping into the VR headset space now? And what are some of the highlights of this Apple Vision Pro?
Yeah, so Apple is a little bit late to the market here. We have seen VR headsets arrive over the last few years. Really, around the 2016 timeframe is when we started to see modern VR headsets as we know it. But there hasn't really been a company that's been able to make virtual reality or augmented reality mainstream yet. These are really still devices that are a bit niche and mostly targeted towards gamers. And so I think Apple probably saw an opportunity to change that here. And as you can see, yesterday, Apple unveiled the headset and showed off a bunch of features. And Apple is really positioning this as a new type of computer, a spatial computer. And the idea is that you can use the apps that you might use on your iPhone or your iPad today, but on a much larger canvas on these virtual windows that are kind of projected around the environment around you. And there's a ton of technology in the headset to make that possible, including 12 cameras, a bunch of sensors, and a brand new chip to process all of that data in a way that doesn't make you motion sickness.
That's cool, because some of those can't be in for very long. But you kind of just touched on this in terms of being kind of late, but I mean, I thought that it sort of seemed like the metaverse, this whole idea of VR was just, it didn't explode in the way that a lot of companies had anticipated, especially now with AI being such a focus of many companies. It just didn't seem like it was going to pan out. And now with a $3,500 price tag and these VR headsets generally down, I mean, are people going to buy this?
So I think this first generation headset, it'll be tough to convince people to buy it because of the price alone. And keep in mind, this is significantly more expensive than other headsets that we've seen, like the upcoming Meta Quest 3, which will be $500. But it is actually similar in price to the Microsoft HoloLens 2, which is also $3,500. But the difference here is that Microsoft is really pitching that headset towards enterprise customers. So they're not expecting everyday people to buy this. I think maybe over time we'll see some interest as prices come down and as the device itself matures and Apple starts to learn what people are really using it for. Yes, there's a chance it might catch on, but I think at $3,500, it is going to be a tough sell for a lot of people right away.
Yeah, definitely.
Very pricey. All right, we'll see who buys one. Lisa Itachico, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Coming up, going behind the scenes with the Queen of Soul.
After the break, we'll give you a rare look at singer Aretha Franklin's creative process and how her decades-long career is still inspiring America. This is Morning News Now. Welcome back. California had an unexpected visit last month. For the second time ever in the last century, a wolverine was spotted in the state. Twice
a wolverine?
At the Inyo National Forest, I guess so. And once at Yosemite National Park. A wolverine was last seen between 2008 and 2018, but as the animal only lives for around 13 years, scientists believe that this sighting is a different animal. Wolverines are more commonly found in areas of Alaska and Canada where there are fewer humans and colder temperatures. They are the largest member of the weasel family. And like the X-Men character, they are famously strong and fierce for their size. I know the national parks have had an issue with people getting too close to animals.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think anyone is getting close to this one.
Well, I actually thought he would look a little bit fiercer. It just looks like a weasel.
I'm not going near it.
Wasn't anticipating that. Cute, though. All right, well, finally this hour, we bring you the Queen of Soul, Aretha Franklin. NBC News correspondent Ann Thompson got a rare behind-the-scenes look into her work and creative process and how she is still inspiring America.
This is an Aretha Franklin few fans got to see. The natural woman on her home turf, the Motor City, with the Detroit Symphony Orchestra. These photos on display for the first time, captured by photographer Linda Solomon.
I think you can see her heart in the way she brought her heart and her soul to her music.
Once again, please, from the top.
Pictures and sound of a rehearsal 25 years ago for Franklin's only concerts with the DSO.
Where was Aretha? She was about right here. She was talking to the maestro. She was talking to her opera coach, who was about here.
Along with Respect and Freeway of Love, Franklin added 2 arias from Puccini operas, including the iconic Nessun Dorma. Respect from the Queen of Soul. There was never any question who was in charge, with her musical director H.B. Barnum.
Wait a minute, H. Just keep turning it around.
or the symphony.
They seem to be moving a little faster than I was.
The DSO marking the occasion with a tribute concert this summer and Solomon's photographs.
25 years later, what do you hope people see in these pictures?
To see the emotion that she gave to her music, to her city, to her fans, that's what I want people to see.
A natural star.
I'll be looking at the moon, but I'll be seeing.
Ann Thompson, NBC News, Detroit.
So neat. And what a voice. Oh, my goodness.
That does it for this hour of Morning News Now.
But the news continues right now. Stick with us. Everybody, good morning. Thanks for being here. I'm Savannah Sellers.
And I'm Valerie Castro in for Joe Fryer. Breaking overnight escalation. A critical dam on Ukraine's front lines is partially destroyed as fighting intensifies. The fallout this morning could be catastrophic. Rushing water is threatening a nearby nuclear power plant and hundreds of thousands of lives. We've got the latest on the high-stakes blame game that's now playing out between the two sides. Mystery in the skies. Today, federal investigators are combing through a forest in Virginia looking for clues, trying to find the reason for why a private jet crashed after flying through restricted D.C. airspace. We've got chilling new information this morning about what the fighter jet pilots tracking the plane say they saw just moments before impact. Making it official, a growing field of 2024 Republicans this morning, all setting their sights on former President Trump, his former VP Mike Pence, and New Jersey's former Governor Christie, both set to formally announce in the next 2 days. But will their campaigns help or hurt the former president? We've got the latest. And the day of days, this morning, exactly 79 years after the Allied invasion of Normandy, a hero's return to the beaches where history was made and strangers became brothers. A lot to get to this morning. Good to be here with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I know. Good to have you with us today. Thanks for being here.
We begin this hour with breaking news out of Ukraine, where there are growing fears of an environmental and humanitarian disaster.
Yeah, this morning, thousands of people are being evacuated in the southern Kherson region after a major dam was breached. Well, now, potentially catastrophic floodwaters are cascading toward towns and villages, putting many at risk. Ukraine has accused Russia of blowing up the dam. Meanwhile, Russia denies those allegations, instead pinning the blame on Ukraine. NBC News has been unable to confirm either report. Our foreign correspondent Molly Hunter has the latest from Kyiv.
Now, the numbers are evolving quickly. It is also still absolutely an active war zone, but tens of thousands of people are now in that dangerous flood zone. Ukrainian officials say they have managed to evacuate just about 1,000 people, but the water in those low-lying villages, it's rising 6 inches per hour.
This morning, a major disaster unfolding in southern Ukraine. Drone video showing the Dnipro River gushing through a critical dam and hydroelectric power plant. This video shot from the banks showing huge chunks of the Kakhovka Dam destroyed. Ukraine blames Russia for blowing up the strategic dam overnight, which is under Russian control in the Kherson region. President Zelensky calling it a terrorist attack, while Russian state media accuses Ukraine of attacking the dam without providing any evidence. The reservoir, roughly the same size as Utah's Great Salt Lake, is in effect the front line. Ukrainian civilians on the West Bank and Russian troops on the east. It's one of 6 dams on the Dnipro River and supplies vital drinking water, power, and cooling for the nearby Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. The IAEA confirms the power plant has adequate supplies of water in the cooling pools, at least for now.
They have very good level of water, which will help for at minimum 1 month to operate a cooling system.
Energy analyst Alexander Harchenko estimates by tonight some 300,000 civilians will be without clean drinking water and says some 500,000 will be affected by loss of power and flooding.
Your 3 biggest fears in the next 24 hours, what are they?
Evacuation speeds, fresh water supply, and I could say power supply for people around the Dnipro.
Ukraine's hydropower company said an explosion inside the engine room of the plant caused the destruction. This station cannot be restored. The strategic fears surrounding this dam date back months. Back in May, the New York Times reporting the water levels reached 30-year highs. Back in October, President Zelensky warning that Russia had mined the dam. And this morning, he says 80 settlements, that's tens of thousands of people, are in the rapid flood zone.
Now, Ukrainian police who are attempting to evacuate Ukrainian civilians say they are coming under heavy Russian shelling this morning. But these are civilians from Kherson who survived months of brutal Russian occupation, now faced with catastrophic flooding.
All right, Molly Hunter, thank you. Stay safe.
Now to the terrifying moments in the skies over the East Coast with Air Force fighter jets trying to chase down an unresponsive plane that eventually crashed. Investigators have made their way to the remote and rugged crash scene in Virginia where the 4 people on board were found dead. NBC's Tom Costello covers aviation for us and is tracking it all from Washington. Tom, good morning.
Yeah, good morning. The NTSB and the FAA both say the pilot of that plane failed to respond to air traffic controllers for most of the flight's duration. To New York, back south again. No one on board ever radioed a mayday. That has a lot of aviation experts suggesting everybody on board may have quickly been deprived of oxygen with the loss of cabin pressure inside the plane, and whatever went wrong may have happened very early into the flight. It took nearly 4 hours for investigators to hike through a dense forest to the charred remains where that private jet went down in Virginia, killing everyone on board.
The wreckage is destroyed, meaning that it is no longer distinguishable as an aircraft. However, there's still several pieces that might be able to assist our fact-finding stage.
Family members tell NBC News that Adina Azarian, a prominent real estate broker, was on board with her 2-year-old daughter, Aria. Azarian's father, John Rumpel, who owns the plane, tells the Washington Post Azarian was a devoted mom who had tried to have a child for years. Rumpel says he and his wife adopted her when she was 40 because she reminded them of their late daughter. Azarian and her daughter were headed from Tennessee to the Hamptons with her nanny and a professional pilot named by Rumpel as Jeff Hefner. Investigators must now unravel the mystery. Did the plane suddenly lose oxygen pressure, quickly incapacitating everyone on board? A similar decompression event and crash killed golfer Payne Stewart and 5 others in 1999. The NTSB's aviation safety director says that has to be a leading investigative theory.
When a person is at ground level, the pressure allows them to breathe. The higher you go, the less pressure there is. And so your lungs, without that pressure, you cannot breathe.
Lack of oxygen would lead to hypoxia. Symptoms include nausea and headaches, confusion, and difficulty breathing. It may have happened soon after takeoff. Just 15 minutes into flight, the pilot stopped responding to air traffic controllers. The plane continued north all the way to Long Island before doing a U-turn heading back towards Tennessee, still failing to respond to controllers.
November 611 Victor Golf, contact Washington Center 127.902, acknowledge.
6 fighter jets were scrambled along the East Coast. As the plane approached restricted D.C. airspace, 2 F-16s were authorized to go supersonic. The fighter pilots could see the private pilot was slumped over and unresponsive, but they could do nothing but watch as the plane flew south into Virginia, ran out of fuel, and crashed. And now the NTSB says the plane was not required to have any black boxes. That doesn't mean it didn't have any. They want to check into that. It's also looking into whether any of the other avionics on the plane's systems may have captured some of what happened and what went wrong with this plane. Guys, back to you.
All right, hopefully we'll learn more. Tom Costello, thanks so much.
Now breaking news out of the Vatican this morning, where Pope Francis is reportedly back home after a trip to the hospital. According to local reports cited by Reuters, the Pope was taken there for a checkup before returning to the Vatican earlier this morning. Now, NBC News has not been able to independently confirm that, and the Vatican has not made any comment, but it comes after a year where the 86-year-old health has been impacted by a respiratory infection and a fever. Well, at this point, the Pope has not canceled his appointments for tomorrow. He also has several high-profile trips coming up. That includes visits to Portugal and Mongolia, so it would not be uncommon for him to have a checkup ahead of these trips. So hopefully all is well. Well, now let's get to the latest in the race for the White House. Today, another Republican candidate is expected to jump into the race, and tomorrow, 2 more will join the pack.
But do any of them have a chance of catching up to former President Donald Trump? NBC News national correspondent Gabe Gutierrez joins us now with more this morning. Gabe, good morning.
Valerie and Savannah, good morning.
Good to see you here.
Good to see you in person, exactly. Well, the Republican Party for the foreseeable future is starting to take shape, but will the competition help or hurt former President Trump. He's now under fire from all sides.
This morning, more candidates lining up to challenge former President Donald Trump for the 2024 Republican nomination. Former New Jersey Governor Christie expected to kick off his run in New Hampshire today. A one-time Trump ally turned critic, he's blasted other Republicans for not taking on the former president directly.
They kind of cozy up to him. They hope that he implodes and that if they're nice to him, that they'll inherit his voters.
Former Vice President Mike Pence filing paperwork to make his White House run official ahead of a formal announcement tomorrow in Iowa. Over the weekend, Pence took a veiled shot at his former boss.
I believe we have to resist the politics of personality and the siren song of populism unmoored to timeless conservative principles.
10 major candidates are now expected to be in the race by week's end. Former President Trump remains the clear frontrunner. But some primary voters in New Hampshire we spoke with are looking elsewhere.
2016, Trump was making his issues about the American people. 2024, I think Trump is making it about him. And
so you're ready to move on?
I'm done.
A distant second in the polls, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis.
I don't think the polling matters right now.
South Carolina Senator Tim Scott on The View defending DeSantis over the governor's ongoing feud with Disney.
Our young kids and what they're being indoctrinated with. I thought he started off on the right foot on that issue. It is 100%.
No, not here. I'm sorry, sir. Do not boo.
New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu, a frequent Trump critic who had long teased a White House bid, now saying he won't run. Writing in the Washington Post, he believes candidates with no path to victory should drop out so as not to divide the Republican opposition to Mr. Trump.
Former President Trump and his message, his style, his brand have cost us dearly, and he doesn't represent the Republican Party.
With an increasingly crowded GOP field, the Republican National Committee just announced stricter rules for that upcoming debate in August for the candidates to qualify for that. And among those rules, at least 40,000 campaign donors, at least 1% support in multiple national polls, and a pledge to support the eventual nominee.
We'll have to see who signs that pledge.
That's a big question at this point.
All right, Gabe Gutierrez, thank you.
Lots of news over the next few days. Good to have you here with us in studio. Well, there's a new problem in Hollywood this morning. It could impact some of your favorite shows and movies. Actors represented by the SAG-AFTRA union have voted to authorize a strike. Now, that doesn't mean they are on strike. It just means that if they don't agree on a new contract with major studios, streamers, and production companies by June 30th, then they'll strike. The strike authorization was approved by an overwhelming margin with nearly, get this, 98% of those who voted supporting the measure. More negotiations are set for tomorrow. Well, this latest development comes more than a month after the Writers Guild of America went on strike over its own dispute with Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers. They have been on the picket line ever since. Some pictures there, and of course, the story we have been covering for you. Well, not in California, where there is growing concern this morning about a slowdown at West Coast shipping ports, including some of the nation's largest and most critical shipping distribution centers. NBC News national correspondent Miguel Almaguer is at the Long Beach port to tell us how it could impact you, because it certainly can. Hi, Miguel. Good morning.
Hey, Savannah, good morning. To be clear, a strike here is not underway, but what's apparent is a worker slowdown here at the docks. The men and women who unload those shipping containers and then get those supplies that you see at grocery stores and retail stores all across the country haven't been showing up for work. Eventually, that'll impact folks at home. The question today, will those workers show up?
This morning at West Coast ports, where everyday products arrive and are then shipped across the country, there's growing concern dock workers may not show up to work again, creating a potential supply chain slowdown. Over the last 4 days, some of the nation's busiest ports have sat idle as the International Longshore and Warehouse Union battles the Pacific Maritime Association over a new contract. As negotiations over pay, benefits, safety, and automation have dragged on for a year, the ILWU says some of its 22,000 rank-and-file members have begun to voice their displeasure by not showing up for work at critical ports. The PMA counters the disruptive work actions effectively shut down operations at some marine terminals. The problems brewing here could eventually impact you at home.
This is sort of a slow burn that could get to a boil pretty quickly.
The National Retail Federation urging the president to intervene because roughly 40% of our nation's imported goods arrive here at the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach. Our partners at CNBC report it could take weeks to clear the short backlog already created, saying many of the containers delayed now are back to school and holiday products.
Because of these slowdowns or dock workers not showing up, that causes delays in getting those goods into stores, and that costs extra money. And at some point, those extra costs could be passed on to consumers.
While today's port problems in no way resemble the massive shipping backlog that threatened the national supply chain during COVID, there is growing concern the problem unfolding here could eventually impact your bottom line.
This morning, the White House and the Department of Labor are said to both be closely watching the situation here on the ground. Meantime, our friends at CNBC report there is some good news, and they are making progress on those contract negotiations. But so far this morning, no deal quite yet. Savannah?
All right, well, good to hear that hope there. As you laid out so well, it could impact all of us at home. Miguel, thank you.
Now let's get a check at your morning news now weather forecast.
Which means that Angie Lastman is back with us with everything you need to know for the week. Hey, Angie.
Hey there, guys. Always good to be with you. We've got some smoke to talk about, and you might even be able to smell it in some places where it's super dense, like Boston and New York. You'll be able to tell that there is, of course, smoke nearby. Other places that you could notice that the hazy skies are in place, Louisville, Indianapolis, Pittsburgh. We will be dealing with this smoke moving overhead here, at least for the next day or so. It's all because of these wildfires that are continuing to burn in parts of Canada. This, along with high concentrations of ozone, leading us to numerous people, millions of people dealing with these air quality alerts, more than 70 million included in this. Where you see those brighter oranges, that's where it is leveled of unhealthy. So that means that it's not great for sensitive groups. If you can stay indoors, if you have those issues, maybe lung issues and such, you're not going to want to be outside, especially doing strenuous activity in places like Kansas City, St. Louis, Washington, D.C., Boston. So just be careful of that through the day today and even possibly into tomorrow. Meanwhile, temperatures are quite warm in Minneapolis. We are running 9 degrees above normal for this time of year. We've got Sioux Falls headed to the low 90s, Davenport high 80s. These numbers are well above normal for this time of year. And it's a much different story as we look up into the New England area. That's where we see temperatures 10, even 15 degrees below normal for this time of year, with Burlington just hitting a high of 58 degrees as we get into the later parts of the day. As we roll through the rest of our week, things kind of moderate out, especially in the Midwest. If you're sick of the heat, if you're looking for a little more comfortable conditions, that arrives by Thursday. We'll start to heat it back up in places like Detroit back on Friday. We get back into the mid 80s. Pittsburgh will hit those low 80s by the time we head to Saturday as well. And Philly sits in those upper 70s to low 80s to round out the work week. We also have some showers that we're tracking, and it's all thanks to a couple of systems that are nearby. We've got a low pressure system that is just near Maine right now. We've also got a low that has an extended cold front that's going to eventually work its way through. Either way, we're going to be dealing with these showers and some kind of pesky rain here through the rest of the afternoon and into the evening hours. And eventually tomorrow we'll still have some lingering showers. They'll start to rotate in as that low starts to move away. But the cool and breezy conditions will be stuck with us at least through Wednesday and potentially into Thursday. Rainfall amounts aren't all that impressive. We'll pick up maybe another 1/4 inch or a 1/2 inch. We'll have heavy rain also possible through parts of the southern plains. That's New Mexico, Oklahoma, Texas. We could see the flooding risk today, so just be aware of that. You don't want to drive through those flooded roadways. That, as far as rainfall amounts are concerned, 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, maybe isolated amounts up to an inch. So some rain to deal with, some smoke to deal with, warm temperatures. We've got it all going on.
Oh, that's right. Mostly mild, it seems, but that smoke is, ugh.
Yes, something for people, definitely. You don't want to be running outside doing those strenuous activities if you're sensitive.
Yeah, take it into account. Angie, thank you so much. Well, coming up a little later on Morning News Now, pride truly is universal. And this hour, we're going to take a closer look at not only why pronouns are so important to the LGBTQ community, but also why they've become such a politically charged issue in 2023.
But first, emotional testimony this morning from Prince Harry as he takes the stand in that high-profile phone hacking case against a British tabloid giant. We'll take you inside that London courtroom coming up next. Welcome back. For the first time in over a century, a royal is being questioned in court. This morning, Prince Harry appeared in London's High Court to give evidence against Britain's Mirror Group newspapers as part of a lawsuit that accuses the company's tabloids of illegally obtaining information about him. NBC News foreign correspondent Megan Fitzgerald joins us now from London with the very latest. Megan, good morning.
Guys, good morning to you. You know, this is truly an extraordinary event. I mean, we have not seen a senior member of the royal family testifying in court for more than 130 years. And to just underscore the rarity of it all, when Prince Harry was sworn in earlier today, he was referred to as Your Royal Highness before cross-examination got underway. This morning, a dramatic day of testimony in a London court. Prince Harry is the first member of the British royal family in 130 years to appear as a witness in court. For the prince, it's personal. He's one of 4 celebrities taking on Mirror Group newspapers, one of several tabloid media outlets he and his wife Meghan accuse of invading their privacy. Harry telling the court, as a child at school, these articles were incredibly invasive. How this material was obtained certainly shocked me. Harry has expressed outrage at growing up in a media spotlight where nothing was sacrosanct or out of bounds, something he spoke about in his Netflix docuseries.
No one knows the full truth. We know the full truth. The institution knows the full truth, and the media know the full truth because they've been in on it.
The prince's attorney, David Sherborne, alleging that the intrusion by Mirror journalists sowed the seeds of discord between Harry and his brother William and triggered bouts of depression. Sherborne telling the court Harry's mother, Princess Diana, was also a Mirror Group target, alleging her phone had also been hacked in the 90s. But legal victory in this case is far from certain for the prince. A Mirror Group lawyer arguing there is no evidence to support claims that Harry or Diana's phones were hacked. Neither was there evidence to support the extent of the alleged unlawful information gathering. Many royal watchers believe Harry is taking a huge gamble, opening himself up to potentially rigorous cross-examination. But it's a risk he's willing to take on his quest of trying to change the media landscape. Yeah, you know, this is just truly unusual. Certainly when you take a look at the mantra of the royal family, never complain, never explain. It's certainly a role model that was set by Queen Elizabeth and, of course, followed by King Charles. Now, as far as court is concerned, the judge says that Prince Harry is expected to testify throughout today and into tomorrow. Valerie?
All right, Megan, thank you so much. U.S. authorities say a former FBI agent turned Russian spy has been found dead in jail. 79-year-old Robert Hansen was sentenced to life in prison back in 2002 after pleading guilty to spying for the Soviet Union and then Russia for more than 20 years. Prison officials say Hansen was found unresponsive and later pronounced dead. A cause of death was not given.
All right, let's get to some other international headlines now, starting in Haiti, where heavy rainfall and flooding has left dozens dead and thousands displaced.
Let's bring in NBC News foreign correspondent Ali Aruzzi for more on that and other world news. Ali, good morning.
Good morning, Valerie. Good morning, Savannah. At least 42 people have died in Haiti after torrential rain caused widespread flooding over the weekend. Another 11 people are still missing, and more than 13,000 are displaced after homes were damaged. The worst-hit city, Léogâne, southwest of the capital, Port-au-Prince, where 3 of the rivers burst their banks. There are fears that the number of dead will rise. Rescue operations have also been made harder by Haiti's ongoing problem with criminal gangs, which control many areas. A massive wildfire in Canada's British Columbia province is shaping up to be one of the largest ever on record in the area's history. The blaze north of Fort St. John has burnt over 900 square miles of land, an area nearly the size of Metro Vancouver. The fire is estimated to be a few hectares in size and is listed as out of control. The wildfire service says it's burning in a steep terrain and is visible to travelers along the highway. Canada is bracing for what forecasters say may be the country's worst wildfire season on record. It's already seen 2,200 fires this year. Projections suggest the risk of wildfire will only increase in June and remain unusually high. And finally, embarrassment in Austria after a political party there announced the wrong winner of its party election over the weekend. The Social Democrats said that the election results to decide the new federal party chairman at the party's conference were mixed up as a result of a technical error. They probably haven't done themselves any favors amongst undecided voters. And those are your headlines.
Good way to put it. Ali, thank you very much. Well, now let's get to nationwide protests in France getting underway again this morning. It's the 14th day of demonstrations since January. Protesters are marching against President Macron's pension reforms, which he controversially fast-tracked through Parliament. NBC News foreign correspondent, Matt Bradley joins us now from Paris. Hi, Matt. So we know these latest reforms are now law in France. So what are the protesters hoping to achieve today?
Well, this is kind of the last gasp of this protest movement, and I have to tell you, this has just started. It's just 20 minutes into this, and we've already gotten our first taste of tear gas. We can expect that all throughout the day, as is typical of these kinds of protests. But what this is aimed at is trying to get this law that has already passed, come this fall, given that this has already passed. Any worker who's 62 years old can probably expect to be working until they're 64. That's the crux of this, and that's why there's so much anger. Just 2 years added to the age of retirement. But for these people, they want to see this law actually reversed, and they're hoping that on Thursday, day after tomorrow, Parliament will hear their case, the National Assembly here, and will try to vote again on reversing the law, which, it's important to note, has already been passed, has already been approved, has already been stamped by the executive and kind of railroaded through. So that's what this is trying to aim at doing, and it's looking unlikely.
Yeah. Matt, first of all, for only 20 minutes in, it does seem like there's already quite a bit of action. Thank you for reporting on this for us. And you mentioned tear gas. Please do let us know if you need to run to stay safe. But you say that the likelihood of this actually being successful, probably not high. Is there anything that could come out of this sort of, as you put it, last breath of protest here that could impact the legislation at all?
Yeah, that's a good question. And the fact is that even the heads of some of the major syndicates who have called out these huge numbers, about 500,000 nationwide are expected to come out today, even they have said that this is probably not going to happen, that the fight is over. But really, what a lot of folks here are expecting and looking forward to, and a lot of these union leaders, even those who admit that this is probably not going to go anywhere in the near term, they're hoping to hold on to the solidarity, to the energy, and especially the unity amongst all of the syndicates, amongst all of the labor unions, hoping that they'll be able to push forward with this, because there is a lot of anger in this country, and it's all directed at one man, President Emmanuel Macron. The reason why is because this was a very popular move, that's one thing. But also, as I mentioned before, he railroaded this through using a controversial element in the Constitution that basically allowed him to make an executive decision over and above the decisions by the National Assembly, where this law was not supported. So again, you're seeing a lot of anger on the streets. This is not necessarily the last gasp of this movement. It's probably the last gasp of the effort to try to reverse the retirement age. But this is something that folks here are hoping will carry on in opposing Macron from here on out. Guys.
Matt, who are you seeing in these protests? Who's coming out in the streets? What type of person is taking part in this? And tell us kind of then what that movement, the legacy is of this whole debate.
Well, there's often been here in France these kinds of protests. This is not new. It's centuries old. It's really part of the culture, part of the heritage. But when you look around, you're seeing, well, a lot of young people, people who are not facing retirement anytime soon. They're part of what I was just describing, this new, rekindled, inspired movement that's opposing Emmanuel Macron and what they see as an imperious French presidency. For them, this is a long-term project that they see as they're attaching themselves onto it on the ground floor. But you see a lot of people who are members of labor unions, people who are members of left-wing political parties. The one, France Insoumise, which is the sign right here, that's led by Mélenchon. That's a very far-left political party. You're also seeing, and we haven't seen them quite yet, we saw them kind of running past, and I think that was what sparked this tear gas that we tasted, an element called the Black Bloc. And these are particularly violent protesters. They come out for a lot of these events. And then there's also a group that's sort of popularly known here in France as casseurs, or sort of those who break things. And these people will come out for just about anything, and they are ready to break things. And that's why you see in time after time, protest after protest here in Paris and throughout the country, cars on fire, police stations getting battered, and in many cases, restaurants, major clothing stores, major brands getting attacked on the streets here in Paris. Guys.
Matt Bradley, great reporting. Please stay safe. Thank you so much.
Coming up, a return to Normandy 79 years after D-Day.
On this solemn anniversary, a hero's return to the shores where strangers became brothers. That is next.
We're back with a closer look at the rising political tensions over immigration. California is now investigating the case of another group of migrants who were flown to the state with essentially no notice. This latest flight comes just days after a different group of migrants were left at a church building in Sacramento. Now California leaders are pointing fingers at the Sunshine State. Back-to-back flights carrying South American migrants touching down in California's state capital, and state officials say it was all orchestrated by the state of Florida. The first flight arriving over the weekend carrying 16 migrants in total that were later dropped off on the doorsteps of a Sacramento church building.
They're in shock. I think they're very exhausted.
They were mostly young men carrying only backpacks ranging in age from 18 to their mid-20s from Colombia and Venezuela. California's Attorney General quickly launching a probe into who could have organized the trip, saying that some were carrying government documentation from Florida showing they were moved under Florida's Emergency Management Division, all part of the state's migrant relocation program. The contractor helping coordinate the flights is the charter company Vertol Systems, also behind the second flight that landed in Sacramento carrying 20 migrants. Both Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and Vertol Systems have not responded to NBC's request for comment.
It's called their voluntary transportation program, and they've hired Vertol Systems, the state of Florida has, to identify migrants in Texas, not in Florida, in Texas, and move them to other states.
The migrants telling local aid groups they were approached by individuals outside a processing center in El Paso and offered help finding jobs. They were then taken to New Mexico and then boarded the private charter plane, unaware they would end up in California, according to California Governor Gavin Newsom, who met with the group. Newsom later tweeting a picture of the California state code that outlines kidnapping, saying, "Ron DeSantis, you small pathetic man, this isn't Martha's Vineyard. Kidnapping charges?"
It's potentially illegal. It could violate criminal laws. It could violate civil laws. So we're continuing our investigation. We'll get to the bottom of that. We want accountability.
Attorneys from Lawyers for Civil Rights now on the ground in Sacramento, looking into the situation on the migrants' behalf.
Certainly, there is a range of possible consequences and liability for anyone who undertakes this type of conduct, whether it's government officials or private actors like the plane company in this instance.
Vertol Systems also facilitated the transportation of some 50 migrants last summer from Texas to Martha's Vineyard at the direction of Governor Ron DeSantis, the move costing the state around $1.5 million. DeSantis now named as a defendant in a civil class action lawsuit filed on behalf of the Martha's Vineyard migrants, claiming they were tricked. DeSantis insisting the migrants chose to board the flight to the island.
It was clearly voluntary, and all the other nonsense you're hearing is just not true. And why wouldn't they want to go, given where they were?
As immigration continues to be a hot-button issue across the country, shakeups continue to happen within U.S. immigration leadership. In the past week, both the acting director of ICE and the head of Border Patrol have announced they will be stepping down from their roles.
Great reporting, Valerie. Thank you. Well, ceremonies are underway this morning to commemorate the 79th anniversary of D-Day, honoring the United States and our allies in a critical battle during World War II that led to the defeat of Hitler's Nazi Germany. NBC News foreign correspondent Kelly Kobaya joins us with more in Normandy, France, and telling us how today is being commemorated. Hi, Kelly. Good morning.
Good morning to you, Savannah. Yes, and school groups are still playing. You can hear them in the background. The official ceremony has now concluded with Secretary of Defense Austin delivering remarks commemorating, honoring these members of the greatest generation, some of whom, many of whom really, signed up to fight when they were still teenagers, now coming back all these decades later to see the places and people they helped to liberate, and for one vet, to be reunited with an old friend.
I've been wanting to come here, though.
Richard Rossi has waited 79 years for this moment.
These should be right there.
Back in Normandy for the first time, finally talking to his best friend, Bob Bailey.
And I heard those birds chirping, and I feel like he's talking back to me. Yeah.
You believe he's here with you now?
Yes. Yeah.
Memories of a childhood friendship flooding back. Richard and Bob grew up together in small-town Lorain, Ohio. They played in the high school band together, both enlisting at 19 and sent off to fight in France.
D-Day is here.
June 6th, 1944. The U.S. and its allies launch Operation Overlord, storming the beaches of Normandy. It would become the largest amphibious assault ever mobilized by the military and lead to the defeat of Hitler.
Jack Myers, U.S. Army!
Today, nearly 8 decades later, those who survived are welcomed back as true heroes. Celebrated in the towns they liberated.
You got to salute back.
Cliff Stump was just 19 years old when his glider landed in Normandy on D-Day. The Army First Sergeant says he never thought he would live long enough to make it back. But this year, at the age of 99, he did.
It just gives me a good feeling in my heart to know that people respect what we did.
Here on Utah Beach, George Saros landed that day in 1944. Part of the Navy, his ship delivered ammunition and equipment. At 98, he never dreamed he'd be here again.
It's a thrill to get back there. I wish my shipmates were here.
These vets from another era, new teammates for the man who brought them here.
I got you.
Former star NFL linebacker Donnie Edwards created the nonprofit Best Defense Foundation, bringing vets back to their battlefields, inspired by his own grandfather, who survived Pearl Harbor. You didn't serve in the military, but this is your way of serving.
Yeah, I just want to give back. And this is how a small part in how we say thank you, especially to our greatest generation.
And to honor the fallen. At the Normandy American Cemetery, thousands of Americans have been laid to rest, some just feet from where they first landed.
These are all young kids who sacrificed their lives for us. It's up to us to make sure that we live a full life and we do the things what they fought for.
And we remember them.
Yeah, they wanted to live too.
Rossi's buddy Bob was killed in action just days after landing in France. Now 99, he wanted to be sure to tell his friend one last thing before he left.
I forgot to tell you, we won the war. Thanks to you.
These vets say it was their duty to serve, and it's our duty to remember. Delta Airlines partnered with the Best Defense Foundation to bring 43 veterans back this year. They come with a medical team. Each veteran has his own caretaker with him the entire trip. And Richard Rossi told me, look, he would have never come here on his own. But one of Donnie's volunteers spotted him in a supermarket close to his home in Florida. He said, hey, are you a World War II vet? Richard said, yeah. And he said, do you want to go to Normandy? And he said, yeah. And all this time later, here he is. Savannah, what a journey for him.
Oh my gosh, what a journey, what a piece, Kelly. It has me teary-eyed. Just incredible to see, and what incredible work that foundation is doing, and to see those vets back there. Just amazing. Thank you so much, Kelly.
Coming up, it's a brand new Vision from Apple, but its $3,500 price tag might have you raising your eyebrows.
Yeah, after the break, a look at the tech titan's latest game changer that delves into the world of virtual reality. You're watching Morning News Now.
We're back with all the latest from that big announcement from Apple about some new technology they're releasing.
Yeah, Apple has made a name for itself as a brand, of course, that revolutionizes tech products. Well, now it's coming out with its first ever augmented reality headset, but it is going to cost you. Well, of course, NBC News technology correspondent Jake Ward was at the big launch event. I can't wait to hear his take on this, as we've kind of seen the metaverse. It seems slow down, but then we're watching them wade into this. Hey, Jake, good morning.
Good morning, you guys. Yeah, that's right. I mean, this looks like basically a high-tech pair of ski goggles, and you interact with data on it using your hands, your eyes, your voice, according to Apple. But with a $3,500 price tag, it's not clear who exactly is going to be able to buy it when it becomes available next year.
Vision Pro is a new kind of computer.
With that, Apple CEO Tim Cook unveiling what the company calls the future of mixed reality and what it hopes will be its next revolutionary product, the Apple Vision Pro headset.
The combination of hands and eyes together truly feels like magic, as if your mind is guiding the experience.
Apple's first new product category in years, retailing for $3,500 and available early next year. It's able to switch between augmented and full virtual reality with a dial. Apple saying it seamlessly blends the real and digital world.
Open an environment like Mount Hood to scale your screen beyond the dimensions of your room, so it feels 100 feet wide.
A lofty vision with a steep price tag from the company that's changed how we communicate.
But what we're going to do is get rid of all these buttons and just make a giant screen.
How we work, use social media, and listen to music. But if products like the iPod and iPhone were designed to be universal, some are asking, who are these new VR headsets actually for?
Is it the new iPhone?
Oh boy, that's a tough question. That's no. Is everyone going to have one of these headsets in the next 5 years? I don't think so.
The market for augmented reality headsets is still small. Fewer than 9 million headsets were sold by any company last year. But the competition is fierce, with tech companies betting big on virtual reality. Like Meta, whose founder Mark Zuckerberg renamed his company in honor of virtual reality, announcing the latest version of its headset just days earlier. Most people will not have the chance to try this technology anytime soon, but those who have say it could be a game changer eventually.
What was really surprising to me was how easy it was to use. The idea that you could put this on in your airplane seat and watch on your $3,500 face computer. Sure, maybe one day.
Now, you guys, it's important to understand what Apple wants out of this, along with Meta, right? If they can get some sort of revolutionary iPhone-like product out there, one that would launch a million other companies, that would be great. And also, the more that we strap in and live our professional and personal lives inside this kind of technology, the more insights these companies can gain about us and the more money they can make. It's important to understand the strategy behind this.
Yeah, you just got to have $3,500 or so. Jake, thank you so much. Always great to have you.
Now to some money news. Microsoft is paying up in a major settlement over Xbox accounts for kids.
Let's bring back CNBC's Silvana Henao for the details on that and some other money news. Hey, Silvana, good morning.
Hey, Savannah. Hey, Valerie. Yeah, so Microsoft will pay $20 million to settle charges by the Federal Trade Commission that the company illegally collected personal information from children without their parents' consent. Microsoft had been charged with violating the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act by collecting data from kids who signed up to the Xbox without telling their parents or getting their permission. The company says it's taking steps to improve its age verification system and ensure parents are involved in the sign-up process. Bed Bath & Beyond is in talks to keep its Bye Bye Baby chain open through a possible sale to the owner of children's apparel retailer Janie & Jack. The Wall Street Journal reports Go Global Retail is bidding to take over Bye Bye Baby from Bed Bath & Beyond, which filed for bankruptcy in April and plans to keep the stores running. The baby business has held up much better than the home furnishings chain, which is closing stores and looking for last-ditch buyers. And some of Reddit's largest communities will go dark next week to protest higher prices for third-party app developers to access the site's code. The subreddits, including videos, reaction gifs, and life pro tips, will switch to private on June 12th and 13th, meaning the general public won't be able to see the pages. App developers say the future of their services are being threatened by the new pricing. Subreddit moderators say the issue is troubling as they often rely on these apps to manage their communities, guys.
All right, Silvana, thank you so much.
Thank you.
June is Pride Month, and for many in the LGBTQ community, it's a time to celebrate who they are.
But with many states passing anti-LGBTQ legislation, the issue of pronouns has become politically charged. For more, we are joined by the editor-in-chief of the LGBTQ+ community platform, Them, Sarah Burke. Sarah, good morning and happy Pride. Thank you very much for joining us. So we've started to see preferred pronouns listed in places like emails or maybe on business cards. So two things here. Walk us through the fact that we are seeing people include those more and more, but then also how this has become such a political flashpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I always recommend that people kind of just think about pronouns just as a common courtesy, right? Just a matter of respecting who someone is. So you wouldn't call someone by the wrong name. When you learn their name, you might want to make sure that you're pronouncing it correctly. So I think including your pronouns in your email signature, for instance, makes total sense. It's just a way of letting people know how to refer to you. Obviously, like you mentioned, we are at a time when this year alone, more than 500 anti-LGBTQ+ bills have been introduced across legislations across the country, right? And some of those do target pronoun usage, trying to actually limit the ability for students and employees to ask teachers and employers to just simply respect their pronouns.
Sarah, people can still get confused, especially when it comes to they, them pronouns. Talk us through gender-neutral pronouns. What do people usually get wrong? And what should you do if you do make a mistake and accidentally use the wrong pronoun?
Sure. So gender-neutral pronouns, I know that they can seem scary, but the use of, for instance, the singular they has been around for so long and has been used to, refer to people who you might not know their gender in literature and in speech for a very long time. So it doesn't have to be scary. I think if you do mess up, a lot of people, feel really bad and want to profusely apologize. Oftentimes it's enough to just say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry about that. I'll make sure to fix it next time. Something that you can also do is just kind of make sure to practice. You can ask a friend, hey, could I use they, them pronouns on you? Because I have an employee who uses they, them pronouns, and I just want to practice using it to make sure I don't mess it up.
Sarah Burke, thank you very much for joining us this Pride Month. We appreciate you this morning.
Happy Pride. Thanks for having me.
Coming up, the latest in our ongoing series, Inspiring America, with none other than Eva Longoria.
I knew I wanted to help Latinas specifically reach their full potential. Just telling people you believe in their potential is huge.
After the break, Hoda's conversation with the actress turned producer on her latest, most personal role, Mentor. That's up next.
Good to have you back with us, and good to be talking about Miss Taylor Swift. Well, as she wrapped up the Chicago dates of her Eras tour, something unexpected happened. Take a look.
I swallowed a bug. I'm so sorry. Oh, delicious.
Yeah, in case you missed that, she said, I just swallowed a bug, but she didn't let it throw her off. She even joked, is there any chance none of you saw that, to her crowd of, 60,000 people? Well, meanwhile, Swifties are looking forward to her latest re-release dropping next month. So just yesterday, she showed us this. It's the back of the album, Speak Now, Taylor's version. Of course, she's re-recording all of her old albums. It's going to feature collaborations. We didn't know this until now, with Hayley Williams of Paramore and also Fall Out Boy. I cannot wait. And the thing that's also really cool about this, sorry, I'm going to nerd out for a minute, is that as she's re-recording, she's releasing songs from that time that we never heard before, which is what these collaborations are on. It's so cool.
I'm sure she'll find a way to work in the bug into some future lyric and some smash hit.
Maybe. Who knows? She's a genius.
All right, thanks, Savannah.
Yeah.
We end this hour with another great story from our Inspiring America series. Actress and director Eva Longoria sat down with Today anchor Hoda Kotb to discuss her latest role, starting a foundation aimed at helping support Latina women of all ages in STEM, business, and on screen. Her goal, to empower Latinas all across the country.
Eva Longoria shot to fame in the hit series Desperate Housewives.
How are you?
The best you ever had.
Action!
And she segued her success into producing and directing. But Eva's most personal role is a long way from a Hollywood stage.
I knew I wanted to help Latinas specifically reach their full potential. And that's a big idea. But when you just telling people you believe in their potential is huge.
Eva created programs to encourage Latina girls to pursue science and technology, business initiatives to help Latina entrepreneurs, and digital efforts to amplify Latina cultural voices. Her goal? To make Latinas a powerful and influential force in the United States.
You have a way of just making you believe in possibility.
I'm like the optimist. All my friends are like, could you turn down the optimism? I'm like, but this can happen. We can do this.
But more than a decade ago, when her success finally allowed her to make a real difference, Eva says she felt unprepared.
Eva Longoria.
So, at the age of 35, Eva went back to school, earning a master's degree in Chicano studies.
But I was like, I really need to figure out where I'm going to have effective, sustainable change, even if it's with one family, even if it's with one person.
To connect better with the people whose lives she sought to elevate, Eva also decided to learn a new language, Spanish.
Language is really an entryway into understanding a culture in its entirety. And so I just had this sudden urge to like, I need to speak Spanish. I need to speak Spanish. And I was 40 when I started.
Wow.
Then, at the age of 44, Eva gave birth to her son, Santiago. She says that little miracle, more than anything, drives her to create a better world for her community.
So, Eva, there's a phrase that I love. It basically is, life gets greater later. I feel like I'm looking at you, and that's what I see.
You know, it's so funny you say that, because I have always felt like my greatest success is ahead of me. And I'm like, oh, I mean, that was great, but like, wait till what's coming next.
Our thanks to Hoda Kotb for that story. Longoria made her directorial debut this year for the film Flamin' Hot. It comes to Disney Plus this Friday.
How cool is that saying? Life gets greater later. I love that. All right, that does it for this hour of Morning News Now.
The news continues right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.